Experiencing the acute pain of betrayal is like a sharp blade cutting through the heart. My existence, once filled with warmth and confidence, disintegrated when the individual I valued most turned to deception. Why, Lucy? I recall questioning, my anguish apparent in my tone. It's not what you think, she dishonestly responded, her gaze avoiding mine, while murmurs of her unfaithfulness resounded. Yes, so much better, she whispered to someone else. The harsh reality, relentless and stark, broke our fanciful notion of affection, leaving me to tread a road strewn with dishonesty. This is my narrative through heartbreak and enlightenment. Take pleasure in observing it. I scanned the room but saw nothing. It was pitch black. Even though I couldn't see a thing, I felt it all. The emotions creeping up were intense, almost making me forget the pounding headache as I turned left. Suddenly, I caught a strong, wild scent. My head felt like it was going to explode, but I let the feeling in. Then it hit me. I did something bad because what I felt was way too small to be harmless. Who did I? The thought barely formed before my headache blasted to the next level. Just chill, baby, she whispered. That husky voice, rough from cigarettes, could only belong to one person in town, and things just got stickier for me. I tried, really tried, but blanked out on the last 24 hours or why my wife's sister was here making me feel good. Elise, this is nice and all, but can you stop? I said. Light then tore through the dark, hitting my head like a bomb. Oh, maybe not my brightest move, she muttered. But you're curious about what's happening, right? Yeah, I said. That's banging around in my noodle. So you remember Netta from last night? She probed. Netta, I replied. But judging by my head, booze was the star of the show. You needed to let loose, she said. From now on, I'm making sure we do just that more often. What do you mean we? I asked. Mabel's gonna have my head. Mabel's gone, honey. Forgot that too? She quizzed. Was it tequila? When I hit that, my short-term memory checks out, and I do dumb stuff. Please don't tell me I went overboard on shots. She shook her head. Her pretty face, moving, made my stomach turn. I bolted for the bathroom but rammed into a wall. Wrong way. Elise pointed me right. I dashed, spotted the toilet with its pink cover, and hurled. Feeling any better? She asked, handing me mouthwash and a brand new toothbrush after I was done. The brush was blue, my favorite shade. Surprisingly, Elise kept her eyes on me, even hugged me from behind as I cleaned up. Elise is not as gifted as Mabel, but the moment felt weird, us being bare. After brushing and rinsing, she faced me keenly. Let me see, she said. This ticked me off. Mabel, my wife, often did the same. I guess their mom had this thing when they were kids. Mabel wanted me to grin widely, so I showed my teeth to Elise. Not like that, sweetie, she said. Coming closer, she kissed me, pressing against me, her tongue sweeping my mouth. Despite the hangover, I was ready. So even after last night, you still want more? She noted. Elise, I just really need our questions answered, I said. Rusty truck, claiming it had character. I kept our house pristine, every room a magazine spread. Life was perfect, or so I thought. Until last night. I remember it vividly. Elise was unusually bubbly, urging me to have another drink. Relax, Mabel. It's just a night out, she laughed, her eyes gleaming with a mischievous glint. The night spiraled into chaos as she led me to the back of the bar, a seedy place we usually avoided. There, she let slip a bombshell, her words slurring from the alcohol. David and I were in love, she whispered, almost as if testing the waters. My heart stopped. What? I managed to choke out, but Elise just giggled, leaning in closer. He's leaving you for me, she said with a twisted smile, her breath hot and reeking of tequila. In that moment, everything shattered. I staggered out of the bar, my mind a whirlpool of confusion and betrayal. The night air was cold, biting into my skin as I walked aimlessly, trying to process what had just happened. How could David do this to me? How could Elise? My own sister, whom I had taken under my wing, betrayed me in the worst possible way. The walk was long and painful. Every step felt like a mile, my once perfect heels now torn and useless. The darkness was my only companion, wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. Dogs barked in the distance, their howls echoing my own internal torment. My legs throbbed, blood trickling down from cuts I hadn't noticed. The reality of my situation hit hard. I was miles away from home, from the life I once knew. Dawn broke, bringing a sliver of hope. I was still far from town, and every step was agony, but I pressed on. Stopping was not an option. I needed to confront David, to make sense of this nightmare. But as I walked, the townsfolk's reactions gnawed at me. Had I become such an outcast? Their fear and avoidance were palpable, leaving me to wonder just how far Elise's poison had spread. By the time I reached the outskirts of town, exhaustion had taken its toll. My legs were jelly, my feet screamed with every step. Starvation clawed at my stomach, but the thought of facing David kept me going. I needed answers, needed to understand how everything fell apart so quickly. As I approached our house, it loomed ominously, no longer the safe haven it once was. The door creaked open, and there was David, looking haggard and guilty. Elise was nowhere to be seen. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation. "David," I started, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and sorrow. "How could you do this to me, to us?" He looked at me, his eyes filled with regret. "Mabel, he began, but words failed him. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. "Just tell me why," I demanded. "Why her? Why now?" David sighed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "It just happened, Mabel. I never meant to hurt you. Elise, she was there, and I felt alive again." "Alive?" I spat, incredulous. "You threw away 23 years for a fleeting feeling?" He hung his head, unable to meet my gaze. "I'm sorry," he whispered, but the words felt hollow, offering no solace. "Sorry won't fix this," I said, tears streaming down my face. "You and Elise, you've destroyed everything." David looked up, pain etched in his features. "I know, and I'll never forgive myself." I took a step back, the weight of betrayal crashing down. "I can't stay here," I said, my voice breaking. "I need to go." He nodded, silent tears falling. As I turned to leave, a glimmer of hope flickered within me. I would rebuild, find a new path, away from the deceit and heartbreak. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to walk. And so, with a heavy heart and a determined spirit, I left the remnants of my old life behind, ready to forge a new beginning. The journey would be long, and the scars would remain, but I would rise from the ashes, stronger and wiser. This was not the end, but a new chapter in my story. Rusty Mustang, proud yet falling apart. Over time, I morphed into someone else, wearing fancy clothes, driving my Mercedes as if I owned the roads. David, the Chicago man, turned into Mr. Smalltown. The town folks got fed up with my city ways, but loved David more for his simple heart. He helped farmers when banks said no, fixed things without asking for much, just enough to cover costs. Then the schools needed computers. Quotes came in sky high. At the town meeting, David offered to do it all for free or at cost. I was stunned. There I was, wanting more, and here was David, content with enough. I can't pinpoint when my feelings shifted. I dressed up more, stayed out longer, flirted without shame. Initially, men responded, but then they withdrew, giving me weird looks. I blamed it on their small-town minds. But walking home, deep shame hit me. I was the issue, not them. And then there was Jeff, a lawyer with a fancy car like mine. Except, turns out, it's his wife's car. He forgot to mention her. Jeff lied a lot during the 4 months we were together. He flirted first, then took things further. He always told me I was pretty. Funny thing is, he was meant to date Elise before me. He had a couple of dates with her when he first came here, then she dumped him. She just laughed whenever we mentioned him. Maybe she knew better than me. I wish someone had told me why she left him. Now I'm here, walking this lonely country road. It feels like it's the same story with David. Ever since she met him, my sister judged all guys by him. In her eyes, none were good enough. I need to get to town to find a way home. As a last option, I need to get some cash so I can make it back. David Forrester, are you up yet? Despite feeling low, hearing Elise shout felt normal. Come for coffee if you want. Elise, no need to shout, I said as I entered her super clean kitchen. Elise was making coffee, wearing nothing. She turned and kissed me hard. She hugged me close, bare skin and all. Shouldn't you wear something? I asked. No, I want you to remember this, she said, then kissed me again. Why keep doing this? I asked her. Because I don't know how it will end, she said, smiling. She asked me to think hard about last night. We sat down and she held my hand. I remembered getting a call to fix the drive-in theater's big projectors. Not hardware, but a software issue. I worked fast because they needed it for a double show, filming funny moments between movies. It was meant to be private, but I messed up the setup and broadcast a personal moment of my sister with that jerk. I couldn't go on, felt like crying. Elise comforted me. She asked what happened next. I said I went to his car, dragged him out, and hit him. Just once, but he fell hard. Then a crowd, including Elise, gathered. Mrs. Daniels, the library volunteer, even kicked him. Elise remembered and smiled. "What then?" she asked. "The sheriff came. Jeff woke up wanting to charge me, but witnesses played it off as him being drunk. He got tickets for drunkenness, DUI, and false reporting. He shouted about being framed as the sheriff took them, but not to jail, to the cinema. You and I, the judge, all were there." The judge took one look at the footage, then at Jeff, and laughed. "You call this false reporting?" he said. "I call it poetic justice." Jeff's face turned red as he realized he'd been caught. Elise squeezed my hand. "See, David? You're a hero. You stood up for me, for us. You showed everyone who Jeff really is." She leaned in, her eyes shining with admiration. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know we'll face it together." I smiled, feeling a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe things were changing, but for once, it felt like they were changing for the better, making everything a lot worse. The rumors got out of control, and people started looking at me differently. Elise's voice softened as she continued. "David, I know it was a mess, but I always believed in you. I saw how hard you worked and how much you cared. That's why I was always around, trying to help, trying to be close to you. But I never meant for things to get so complicated." I listened, feeling the weight of the past weeks press down on me. Elise's words felt like a balm, soothing some of the pain and confusion. Her honesty was a stark contrast to the deceit I had faced with Mabel. "You know," she said, "Mabel wasn't always like this. There was a time when she was happy and we were all close, but something changed and she started looking for more, for something that wasn't there, and when she couldn't find it, she turned to Jeff." I nodded, understanding the complexity of it all. "I guess we all change," I said. "Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. But that doesn't mean we have to accept it." Elise smiled, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and hope. "Exactly, and that's why I'm here. I want to help you find happiness again, to be there for you in a way Mabel never could." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation settling in. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. Elise's presence was a reminder that I wasn't alone, that there was still love and support in my life. "I appreciated Elise," I said, squeezing her hand. "You've always been there for me, even when I didn't realize it. And I want you to know that I value you more than you might think." She leaned in, resting her head on my shoulder. "We'll get through this, David. Together. No matter what happens, we'll face it as a team." Her words echoed in my mind as I thought about the steps ahead. It wouldn't be easy, but having Elise by my side made it seem possible. We would rebuild, piece by piece, and find a way to move forward. "Okay," I said, determination in my voice. "Let's get this done, one step at a time." Elise nodded, her smile widening. "That's the spirit. Now let's get dressed and face the day. We've got a lot to do, and we're going to do it together." With that, we rose from the couch, ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had the strength to face it, thanks to Elise's unwavering support and love. My heart sank when I heard Elise say that the truth about how Jeff would come out when the divorce papers hit. The reality of Jeff's deceit hit me like a ton of bricks. No riches, no law career, just a man who leeches off others and plans to continue doing so after the divorce. Hearing all this from Elise felt like a punch in the gut, but I had to admit, I still had lingering feelings for Mabel. Elise held me closer, her warmth a small comfort. "I know, Han, but you gotta let her go. You can and you will," she assured me, her voice steady and confident. We devised a plan for the divorce, knowing we needed a solid reason for Mabel to sign off. Unfortunately, the laws seemed to protect even those who broke hearts. So, we brainstormed and figured a fair deal might tempt her to sign. We hadn't planned on what happened at the drive-in. That was pure luck. But there were enough people who knew about Mabel and Jeff, ready with cameras. Our goal was simple: get Mabel to face the proof, make her sign the papers, write a goodbye note to me, and leave town for good. After she left, Elise would help me forget all about her. The scene at the drive-in theater was surreal. Watching Mabel on the big screen, her affair with Jeff exposed to half the town, was enough to shock anyone. The judge and sheriff acted swiftly, taking Jeff to jail. His wife and relatives bailed him out the next morning, taking him home. According to Bonnie from the bank, Jeff would soon be divorced and deprived of his assets. They released Mabel outside the drive-in theater, but since Jeff's car had been confiscated, she had to walk nearly 30 miles home. "Let him get what he deserves," I said, the words feeling like a small victory. Elise chuckled softly. "Anyway, honey, seeing the woman you love 20 feet above the ground on that enormous screen in front of the entire city was probably enough to startle you. The judge concluded that the best thing for you was to get drunk and escape yourself," Elise continued. "The sheriff remembered how his brother got over his divorce hangover by hanging out with another woman at a cheap bar. I couldn't let that happen, so as soon as you drank, I took the initiative." I looked at Elise, her face a mix of determination and tenderness. Then I questioned why she had done all of this for me. "I don't typically drink much," I explained. "In college, I discovered that I had a low tolerance for alcohol, especially tequila." "It was terribly horrible, dear," she said, her voice laced with concern. "You must have been in awful shape because you not only finished the entire bottle, but also ate the damn worm." I didn't know what to say, so I looked away, embarrassed. "Then I brought you home," she continued. "I brought you to my place because I feel at ease here and it was closer. Do you remember the rest?" She looked at me, raising an eyebrow and smiling broadly. "No," I replied nervously. "Did I act like a fool while I was drunk? Did I try to have sex with me?" She finished for me, mocking the seriousness of my tone. I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. She snuggled even closer. "No, you didn't try," she began. "I stripped you nude the moment we walked through the door. We had sex 3 times last night. The first time was right there on the floor." She pointed to a spot near the door. "For the second, we went to my bedroom. It was quite nice. You said you loved me then, and you stated that if you weren't already married, you would have married me." Her words hung in the air, a blend of confession and triumph. I tried to process everything, the betrayal, the night of drunken passion, and the realization that Elise had always been there for me. "Then we fell asleep," she concluded, her smile never wavering. As I looked into her eyes, I felt a mix of emotions, guilt, relief, and a strange sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something new, something real. Elise had always been there, and perhaps now it was time for me to truly see her. I awoke around 3 a.m., the house silent and still. Groggy, I made my way to the bathroom, the cold tiles against my feet jarring me awake. When I crawled back into bed, the warmth of the blankets enveloped me, and I snuggled up to Elise, feeling a mix of comfort and shame. "I'm so sorry, Elise," I whispered into the darkness. "This must have been just as horrible for you as it was for me. I honestly don't know what to say or do. I'm just feeling numb right now. I can't believe Mabel would cheat on me. I think I have no idea what to believe anymore. And to be honest, it's not entirely my fault. I've sort of let myself go. I suppose I'm just like that rusted old Mustang out there. You can look at me and say, I used to be someone, but now I'm just a joke." I attempted to sit up, to distance myself from her, but she clung to me tighter, refusing to let go. "Elise, I just wish you didn't have to be the sacrificial lamb who tolerated me last night," I murmured. "David, are you out of your mind?" she barked, sitting up and glaring at me. "Sometimes you make me so mad. Why the hell do you think I'm here?" She stood up, hands on her hips, eyes blazing. "Do you know why you woke up here instead of at some cheap motel?" she demanded. I shook my head, feeling utterly lost. "You're all mixed up about things, and you feel like a pity case. You just don't see things clearly because one ignorant woman who doesn't know any better tried to drag you down." Elise was visibly angry now. "David, do you think I can't handle one drunken man?" she exclaimed. "You are not a violent drunk. You don't exhibit any hostile behavior. Everything that happened to you last night was because people care about you. The sheriff and the judge adore you. Everyone in these 2 small towns adores you. We couldn't do it without you. Your business serves both communities, and most of the time you charge significantly less than competitors. You offer credit to small farmers and business owners. You do things for the schools and so on. David, we all love you," she continued, her voice softening. "We will not allow anyone to mistreat you, including my foolish sister." David, you seem to have forgotten that I took your clothes off last night. I wanted to be with you. I've always wanted this. So when the opportunity arose, I took advantage of it. You and your Mustang just need a little care, some polishing and sprucing to realize your full potential. Then you'll both be something to celebrate. She fell silent, her eyes locked on mine. You have 60 days until you have to go to court to sign the final divorce papers or attempt to reclaim my idiotic sister. Why don't you go on a diet, start a workout routine, and restore your car so you can shine? It's enough to make Mabel get her head out of her ass and want you back. Perhaps you'll get over her and want someone else. I'm not sure how far I was from town when the next truck arrived. It was a massive old vehicle, likely transporting components or materials. The driver, an older man with a weathered face, peered down at me from the cab of the truck. "Where are you heading?" he asked, his voice gruff but not unkind. "I just need to get into town," I replied, feeling a glimmer of hope. "How old are you?" he asked, his eyes narrowing slightly as he assessed me. I hesitated, my vanity kicking in. Maybe he thought I was younger than I looked. In truth, the situation was very different. "I'm 35, I told him, subtracting around 10 years from my actual age. The lie slipped out easily, a small attempt to cling to some shred of pride. "True age. Is your dress older than you?" he quipped sharply. "However, it's a good starting point. Remember the old saying from the 1980s about giving hitchhikers rides?" "No," I replied, still bewildered. "It was on every bumper sticker," he said. "Still can't remember?" I said gas, grass, or ass, he hinted. "Oh," I remembered. "I don't have any money for gas since I'm heading to the bank in town. I've never smoked marijuana, so I don't have that either. And as for the third option..." I trailed off, my voice trembling. I was confident that the driver wouldn't leave me stranded far from the city. He returned his head to the cabin and started the motor, beginning to drive away. "Wait," I screamed, my heart racing with fear and desperation. He stopped and helped me into the bed of his truck. He then did the unthinkable. I was both astonished and numb, unable to process what was happening. This wasn't about making love. It was a violation, plain and simple. David had always been gentle with me, gradually working me up until I was asking him to please me. I hadn't even had sex with Jeff yet. We were on our way to that last night when we were stopped, but I was not going to have sex with Jeff unless he asked me to marry him. In any case, what happened in the truck was disrespectful and dehumanizing. I wanted to yell at him to stop, but if I did, he'd throw me out of the vehicle, forcing me to walk the rest of the way into town. Any challenge was preferable to this. So, I let him use my body while my thoughts raced, trying to figure out the next step. As soon as I got to town, I would withdraw money from the bank and contact David and Jeff. I couldn't afford to wait 60 days to speak to my husband. They provided me with insufficient money to survive on. Furthermore, I wasn't sure I wanted a divorce, and Jeff, he was in better shape than David, dressed in flashy clothes and drove a car similar to mine. But I wasn't certain I wanted him either. He was fun and exciting, but when things went wrong, David was the type of man I could rely on. I didn't know about Jeff. David had always tried to protect me, even though he was out of shape. I couldn't believe it when I saw him drag Jeff, who was bigger, out of the car and beat him up because of me. So I needed to go to the bank and withdraw some money so I could rent a car or have someone take me home. I'd talk to David and see if we could resolve our issues. The judge's order and the preliminary divorce agreement I signed last night would mean nothing. After the truck stopped, the driver even dared to reach out and kiss me. "Perhaps you'll let me in again later?" he asked, smirking. "Just drive the truck," I responded harshly. He was right to let him go again. I got nothing out of it. I couldn't believe it when we got to the bank. We had driven for barely 10 minutes. He had taken advantage of me for such a short time, yet it felt like an eternity of business there. I had spent numerous mornings chatting with the staff, sharing laughs and small talk. Yet today, they acted as if I were invisible. I figured they must have heard the rumors, probably even seen the evidence of my downfall. Small towns are notorious for their grapevines. As soon as the bank doors opened, I pushed my way in. My appearance must have been quite a sight. My dress was filthy and torn, my hair disheveled, and I probably still had remnants of last night's makeup smudged across my face. I approached the teller, who gave me a pitying look. "Mabel Forrester," I said, trying to muster some semblance of dignity. "I need to withdraw some money." "Mrs. Forrester, I'm sorry, but your accounts have been flagged," she responded sympathetically. "You'll need to speak with the bank manager." I groaned inwardly, knowing this would be another uphill battle. I trudged to the manager's office and knocked on the door. Mr. Hopkins, a stout man with thinning hair and a permanent frown, looked up from his desk. "Mabel, please come in," he said, not unkindly. "I understand you're going through a rough time, but your accounts have been frozen due to the pending divorce proceedings." "I need money, Mr. Hopkins," I pleaded. "Just enough to get by for a few days." He sighed deeply, glancing at my disheveled state. "I'll see what I can do," he said, picking up the phone. After a few minutes of hushed conversation, he nodded and hung up. "I can release a small amount to you, but it won't be much, just enough for essentials." I thanked him profusely, taking the few bills he handed me. It was humiliating, but I needed it. As I walked out of the bank, I saw a familiar face across the street. It was Sarah Winslow, one of the teens from earlier. She was with her friends, laughing and enjoying their day. Our eyes met, and her smile faltered. She nudged her friends, and they quickly dispersed, leaving her alone. "Mabel," she called out, walking over hesitantly. "I didn't recognize you earlier. I'm sorry." "It's fine, Sarah," I replied, forcing a smile. "I'm just trying to get by." She nodded, looking uncomfortable. "If you need a ride somewhere, I can take you." I considered her offer, then shook my head. "No, thank you, I'll manage." As I turned to leave, she grabbed my arm gently. "Mabel, people talk, but they don't know everything. If you ever need help, just ask." Her kindness brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you, Sarah," I whispered, squeezing her hand. I made my way back to the bench, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. The money in my pocket was a temporary fix. I still had to figure out my next steps. As I sat down, a plan started forming in my mind. I needed to get to David. I needed to see if there was any chance to salvage our relationship or at least get some clarity on where we stood. Just then, a familiar car pulled up in front of me. It was Elise, her face a mix of concern and determination. "Get in," she said firmly. "We need to talk." I hesitated, but the need for answers outweighed my pride. I climbed into the car, and we drove off. Elise didn't say much, but her presence was oddly comforting. We drove in silence until we reached a quiet spot by the lake. She parked the car and turned to face me. "Mabel, I know you're in a tough spot, but you need to figure out what you want. Do you want to fight for David, or do you want to move on?" Her directness was a stark contrast to the chaos in my mind. "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't even know where to start." "Start by being honest with yourself," she advised. "And with David, whatever happens, you need to face it head on." I nodded, taking a deep breath. "You're right. I need to talk to David." Elise smiled, a rare warmth in her eyes. "Let's go then." As we drove back to town, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe things could get better. Maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to rebuild my life. With Elise's support and the determination to face my problems, I was ready to take the first step. Several kids pointed at me and laughed as I stood there, feeling more exposed by the minute. Their mother quickly ushered them away, but not before giving me a smug grin. I was aware that my clothing was wrinkled, but it was no excuse for such rudeness. Sally Anderson, a bank employee, noticed me walk in and grinned while looking away. I realized she was about to start laughing at me. I waited in line with the cashiers, feeling the stares of everyone around me. The man at the end of the line appeared afraid. He began coughing and hastily went to sit at the table. The bank provided services such as filling out forms and writing checks. The woman in line ahead of me now motioned for me to move forward, struggling not to chuckle while dialing a number on her cell phone. She remained approximately 5 feet away from me in line, as if my disheveled appearance might be contagious. Mary Dickinson approached me and led me out of the line to her office. Mary and I went to school together, and she handled all of our expenditures. "Hello, Mary," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm glad you came for me. I don't have a wallet and I need cash. It does not matter." She smiled. Finally, I felt a sense of relief, thinking I had found someone in this small town who respected me in the way I deserved. I noticed Mary dialing a number on the phone while trying not to giggle. "What's hilarious about my wrinkled dress?" I asked. Mary laughed as she explained that it wasn't the clothing. She removed a mirror from one of her tables. She handed me the mirror, and I stared at myself. My makeup looked horrible. My eyeliner streamed down my face, giving me the look of a raccoon. My pricey lip gloss had been smeared vulgarly all over my face, probably when the truck driver kissed me. I resembled a cross between Heath Ledger's Joker and a distressed woman. But what probably made everyone laugh the hardest was 2 enormous drops of bird excrement in the front of my hair. What I mistook for rainfall was a message from the pigeons indicating that they did not approve of me either. "So you said it doesn't matter if I don't have my wallet or identification." I spoke with as much dignity as I could muster. "I think $1,200 will be sufficient." "When I said it didn't matter," Mary started, "I meant that it doesn't matter if you have a wallet or not. I can't offer you money." "What the hell are you talking about, you country bitch?" I exclaimed. I leapt to my feet and leaned towards her, exhaling deeply. If only she understood what I had to go through. Mary stayed calm and professional. "Mabel, even if you believe you belong to the elite society of the big metropolis and own fancy clothing and a car, you are just as country as I am. We attended school, played together, and grew up in the same tiny town. So get off your high horse and allow me to explain what is going on." I sat back down, and she paused for a few moments before continuing to chat. "The accounts you have access to have been temporarily frozen," she explained. "I do not comprehend," I snapped. "This has never occurred before. Why is my money frozen? Do you realize how much money I have in that blasted bank?" "Yes, I understand," she spoke beautifully. "Not one penny. Your husband owns all of the money in these accounts, including the credit cards you do not now have, or if the information from last night was correct. Soon-to-be ex-husband." "I do not understand what is going on here," I snapped. "Yet David and I remain married, and we shall remain till the final verdict is signed. I'll get a fantastic lawyer, and in 60 days no paperwork will be signed. David and I will get together again, and you rednecks will have plenty of time to eat crow smeared in feces." Mary began laughing. "What's so funny?" I barked. "You should have left out the final hour. Then we'd have eaten you," she laughed. "Okay," she said. "I've been told. If you come, I am permitted to offer you $0 and provide you with a phone number. Here's $0. She gave me an empty bank envelope before handing me the phone number. "David, I am deeply sorry," I said into the phone, my voice trembling with regret. "No, you do not regret it. Mabel, you have chosen your path. Now follow it," came the reply, cold and unyielding. It wasn't David. I recognized the voice. It was my sister, Elise. "Elise, you're not taking my husband." I screamed into the telephone, feeling the weight of desperation in my words. "Why not, Mabel?" she asked, her tone infuriatingly calm. "He will make some city woman a happy wife. Why not me?" "Because you're my sister," I retorted, my voice breaking. "That must signify something. This implies I called Mom and Dad in Chicago. I did not tell them what a cruel thing you did to the man who has loved and supported you for over 20 years. The same man who covers all of Mom's pricey surgeries. That is what I decided. I will let you tell them." "Elise, what are you talking about?" I asked, my confusion growing. "David needs some time away from you to clear his mind," she explained, her voice softer now. "So you are going to Chicago for 2 months. You may return in 60 days for a court hearing. You will also have 1 meeting with David during that period. Until then, Mabel, leave him alone. He is already suffering enough. I left you a bus ticket at the station as well as a suitcase full of your fashionable items. I even left you $1.20 to buy meals on the journey. Stay with Mom and Dad for a few months and consider your actions. Perhaps when you return, he will be ready to speak with you. Perhaps you can contact Jeff in the meanwhile." "Thank you, Elise," I replied, my voice hollow. "I wish I could speak with David and address this, but you at least gave me an opportunity." "Don't thank me," she replied coldly. "I'll do my best to take it from you." That night, Elise prepared a salad for dinner. Her garden produce included lettuce, tomatoes, and celery, as well as turkey bits for protein. "Great snack," I said, trying to muster some enthusiasm. "What more might we have?" "It was dinner time," she said curtly. "You're on a diet." After supper, she scrubbed all of the dishes and led me into the kitchen to rinse and dry them. Despite the fact that I repaired appliances in town and had contacts with every major manufacturer, Elise did not have a dishwasher. When I mentioned it, she simply said, "I don't want her." We then sat on her porch swing, observing the stars and the night sky. When it cooled down, she pulled a blanket around us, and we sat rocking and talking. She had me talk about what I was feeling, and it felt great to talk it out. She also told me numerous things I didn't know about her. I had watched her grow up, but it became clear that there were many aspects of her life that I had never known. Elise oversaw my computer repair department, but she didn't have a computer at home. She had an iPad, which she could use for email and internet access, but at home, she favored simplicity. She was essentially a country girl raised in the metropolis. Mabel, on the other hand, desired all modern luxuries. She simply kept things till a new model was released. She valued sophisticated things more. Mabel had not worked a day in her life. She regarded herself as part of the fast-paced modern city and found living here uninteresting. As I sat there with Elise, I realized how different we were and how much I had overlooked in my pursuit of a lifestyle that now seemed so hollow. The night sky was vast and full of stars, each one a silent witness to my journey of self-discovery and the path that lay ahead. Maybe staying in Chicago was the best option for her. When it was time for bed, I took the blanket we were using on the porch and went to the couch. "What are you planning to do?" asked Elise. "I'm going to bed," I said. "Our bedroom is upstairs," she stated abruptly. "Elise, I have already taken advantage of your hospitality," I began. "God, you're an idiot," she chuckled. "Okay, last night we slept together." "True, you weren't sober, but it wasn't," I started to say, but she cut me off. "You have already made love to me more than once. If you don't want to have sex with me, that's okay, but why should I suffer?" "What do you mean by suffering?" I asked, confused. "I tried it for the first time last night," she explained. "I received what my sister had for half of her blasted life. I fell asleep while holding someone who cared about me. I was so thrilled that this was the first thing that came to me this morning. Well, you remember. Anyway, I know you didn't mean what you said last night, and I don't expect it of you. But I really do want you to sleep next to me, at least for another few nights." "Me?" I asked, still puzzled. "There's no need for me to sit here alone in my small house while you stroll about in that store. You and Mabel called home," she said, looking at me and smiling. "I will not bite you until you ask. I will not put you under strain. Let's just be friendly, I promise." I followed her upstairs, recalling how her body looked without clothes. As I lay down that night, listening to her breathe as she snuggled against me, I attempted to imagine resting close to her sister. I'm not sure where I came from, since when I awoke the next morning, she dragged me out of bed. "Come on, get up. It is time to get up," she said. "What?" I asked groggily. "What is for breakfast?" "Dirt," she smiled. "We're going to do morning exercises. Breakfast will come when we get rid of the tummy." When I got out of bed, she had already prepared sweatpants and a t-shirt for me. I got dressed as she smiled at me. "Do not forget your footwear," she spoke mockingly. I bent down to put on my shoes and noticed she was wearing flip-flops. "How do you plan to run in those?" I asked. "I am not going to," she chuckled. "I will train with you, but I do not require as much as you. My legs and ass already prefer you, so I am good." We left the house. I protested all the way. It was hardly light. We're running to the diner for breakfast. "You'll get a glass of fresh juice, 2 slices of bacon, half a slice of gently buttered bread, and half a grapefruit," she said, smiling. "That's not the worst part," she continued. "It is 6 in the morning. Your breakfast will be ready for you till 6:20. The eatery is 2 miles distant. If it takes you more than 20 minutes to get there, you will be without food." "What happens after I get there?" I asked. "Then we shall eat breakfast together. Then we'll go home, perform our morning workouts, take a shower, and head to work. You have a short day planned, and we will return here to begin doing that other thing," she explained. "What else matters?" I asked, still groggy. "We'll discuss this when the time comes. Hurry up, or you'll be without breakfast," she smiled. When I started running, 10-minute miles were relatively easy, so she had set a reasonable challenge. A terrific plan. Every week, we would shorten the time by a minute so that I could follow it. This meant that every week, I had to go 30 seconds faster each mile. At the conclusion of the 4th week, I would have run at my fastest speed ever, 8 minutes per mile. I had no idea what would happen next, but right now, all I wanted was my breakfast. So, I ran. Every time I fell behind or attempted to relax, Elise drew ahead. Just seeing her beautiful ass in those shorts made me want to run faster. When we arrived at the diner, Rose, the waitress, smiled and directed us to our table. She looked at the clock on the wall. We only had 30 seconds before we'd be hungry. Elise told me she was proud of me. She kicked off her flip-flops beneath the table and ran her bare feet up and down my sweaty feet. She appeared to relish caressing me whenever possible. It was so different from Mabel, who only touched me during intercourse. I noticed that all of the males in the diner were staring at Elise in her exercise gear. The funny thing was that Mabel dressed in a way to draw attention to herself, and she had to stroll around to ensure everyone saw her. She then pointed out to me that others were staring at her. Elise made it apparent that only my viewpoint mattered to her. We reached home much slower, and I was on the verge of collapse. She looked at me and replied, "No, cowboy. We're not finished yet. Squats and push-ups. We also need to work out our upper body." Elise's understanding of squats was unusual. I lay down on the floor with my knees bent. She sat on top of my legs, grasping them for leverage. Every time I stood up, she kissed me. The first time I only completed 10. Then I fell. "Come on," she said. "One more with tenderness. I will make it worthwhile." I gazed at her. "I can, Elise," I said. "Come on," she said. "You'll like it." I proceeded to lift myself up, tensing my stomach throughout. I was about to give up until I looked at Elise and noticed she had removed her top. My eyes widened, and I extended myself all the way just to ask her why she did it. When I was almost at the top, she grabbed me and pulled me the rest of the way. "I knew you could do it," she stated. She then kissed me. However, this kiss was not merely a peck like the others. She pushed her tongue into my mouth and pressed me against her chest. She said, "You can do whatever you want, David. I truly believe in you." Push-ups made me feel warm throughout my body. She said she needed 10. Elise's push-ups also included kissing. I got into a push-up posture above her, and when I needed to lower my body, our lips would meet. Then I needed to push up from her. As out of shape as I was, I could only complete 6. But Elise remained proud of me. "Wait until you can do 20, she advised. I felt much more fatigued. "But you didn't play any sports?" I said. "I warmed up watching you, dear," she chuckled. Then I walked into her bathroom to take a shower. I was going to soap up when the shower door opened, and Elise strolled in. "Relax. You do not need to do anything you don't want to," she replied. "I am merely conserving time and water." After our shower, we went to work. Over the last 3 years, I've had morning meetings with all staff. This way, we understood what we needed to do in terms of staff, and whether certain areas, such as farm equipment repair, household appliances, or computers, needed more people, or whether they were free and could assist someone else. I frequently did odd jobs, and a few clients requested me to handle their renovations personally. Following the meeting, I congratulated everyone for handling everything while I was away. They were all really sympathetic and advised me to take more rest. I was about to choose my remodeling project when I realized it was already booked. My job was in the workshop downstairs. I went down there, but before I could turn on the light, the door banged hard and shoved me against the wall. When I stepped off the bus in Chicago, I was enraged. Elise had a very good sense of humor. None of the clothes in her bag fit in the bus station restroom. I opened my luggage and attempted to change into new clothing to replace my mint dress. I spotted a couple of pairs of casual pants that would be ideal for taking the bus. Unfortunately, she did not send any tops that would match them. The few tops she included were excellent, but they were designed to be worn with skirts or under other clothing. Another issue was that she hadn't brought any stockings, only socks. My father looked at me in shock, his eyes widening before he burst into laughter. My mother, however, looked horrified, and she quickly ushered me into their car. "Let's get you home, Mabel," she said, her voice a mix of concern and embarrassment. On the drive home, my mother kept glancing at me through the rearview mirror. "Mabel, what on earth happened to you?" she finally asked, unable to hold back any longer. I sighed deeply, feeling the weight of the past few days pressing down on me. It's a long story, Mom, I replied warily. Elise sent me here with clothes that don't match and shoes I can't walk in. I got bird crap in my hair, and a dog peed on me while I was trying to sleep at a bus station. To top it all off, this old man on the bus kept harassing me. My father snorted, trying to suppress another laugh. Sounds like quite the adventure, he said, shaking his head. I always told you, Mabel, city life isn't as glamorous as it seems. As we pulled into the driveway of their modest home, I felt a wave of relief. Despite everything, it was good to be somewhere familiar. My mother led me inside, fussing over me as she helped me clean up and change into some of her old clothes. They were a bit outdated, but at least they were clean and comfortable. Over a simple dinner, I recounted the events that had led me here, from my rocky marriage with David to my ill-fated journey back home. My parents listened intently, occasionally exchanging worried glances. When I finished, my mother reached across the table and took my hand. Mabel, we're here for you, she said softly. You can stay with us as long as you need, but you need to figure out what you want to do next. You can't keep running away from your problems. I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. I know, Mom, I replied. I don't know where to start. You start by figuring out what makes you happy, my father said firmly. And if that means staying away from David and sorting out your life, then so be it. Later that night, as I lay in the bed of my childhood room, I felt a strange mix of emotions. I was exhausted, humiliated, and uncertain about the future. But for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could turn things around. The next morning, my mother handed me a cup of coffee as I sat at the kitchen table, contemplating my next steps. Mabel, I think you should talk to a lawyer, she suggested. Get some professional advice about your situation with David and Elise. I nodded, realizing she was right. I couldn't just drift along, hoping things would resolve themselves. I needed to take control of my life. Thanks, Mom, I said, giving her a small smile. I'll look into it. With a renewed sense of determination, I started making calls. I found a local lawyer who specialized in family law and made an appointment. As I prepared to leave for my meeting, my mother handed me a freshly washed set of clothes and a reassuring smile. You've got this, Mabel, she said. Remember, you're stronger than you think. As I stepped out into the bright Chicago morning, I felt a surge of confidence. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt ready to face whatever came my way. My father stared in shock, unable to comprehend what the old man had just insinuated. As soon as we got into the car, he turned to me with concern written all over his face. What was that old man talking about, Mabel? I forced a smile, trying to brush it off. It's just a misunderstanding, Dad. My mother, always perceptive, wasn't convinced. She looked at me intently, seeing through my facade. Mabel, what did you do? She asked, her eyes narrowing. Mom, how do you know I did something? I protested, trying to sound innocent. Mabel, she sighed, if someone had wronged you, you would have told David, and he would have dealt with it. David loves you. He'd never let anyone hurt you. If David had done something terrible, you'd have called Elise first, then us. Elise called us to pick you up. She said she was fine, but David was hurting and would be okay eventually. This all points to you doing something. I glanced at my father, who looked at me with a mixture of disappointment and curiosity. Is it so bad that you can't fix it? He asked. I took a deep breath, the weight of my actions pressing down on me. I'm not sure I want to fix this, I admitted. David is boring, so I found someone else. My father's grip tightened on the steering wheel, and he slammed on the brakes, nearly sending me through the windshield. What? He shouted, his voice filled with disbelief. Over the next few days, I adjusted to life at my parents' house. They made it clear they weren't thrilled about me returning, even temporarily. Their home was a modest 3-bedroom colonial. One bedroom served as their sleeping quarters, another was converted into a gym, and the third was a media room. I ended up sleeping on the living room floor in a sleeping bag since they didn't want their expensive couch ruined. On the third day, I finally mustered the courage to call Jeffrey. He answered cautiously. Hello? He said quietly. Jeff, honey, it's me, I chirped, trying to sound cheerful. There was a long silence before another voice came on the line. Who is this? A woman demanded. This is Mabel Forrester, I replied, my confidence wavering. Bitch, she spat. This is Jeffrey's wife, or maybe ex-wife soon. Did you know Jeffrey's unemployed, homeless, and carless? I was stunned. What about the Mercedes E-Class? I asked, confused. Jeffrey used my car for his errands. He's gotten into trouble, and my father fired him. If you want his stuff, come pick it up, she sneered before hanging up. Reality hit me hard. I had been living in a fantasy, seeing myself as the center of my own universe. Now I faced a test of character. 3 paths lay before me. Become independent. I could find a job and support myself. Find another man to take care of me. After all, I was a charming city girl. Beg David for forgiveness and ask him to take me back. This was the easiest option, but did I really want it? I decided the third option would be my fallback plan. The first option appealed to me the most. That night, after my parents went to bed, I started looking at job listings, but realized I couldn't even remember what I had studied in college. I needed to talk to David. I called our home phone, but no one answered. Then I tried David's cell phone. On the third call, someone picked up. David, honey, what did I study in college? Do I have a degree? I asked desperately. David is no longer your honey, and he's busy, a woman's voice snapped. Who is this? I demanded. Why are you answering my husband's phone? God, Mabel, I know you're a bit slow, but can't you recognize your own sister's voice? Elise replied. Elise, I shouted, don't you have something better to do? David can entertain himself. Goodbye, Mabel, she said coldly. Your major was in child development, but that was over 20 years ago. It's probably irrelevant now. Honestly, you'd make a terrible mother and an even worse teacher. I hung up, feeling more lost than ever. The realization hit me that I had to figure things out on my own. No more relying on others to bail me out. It was time to face my mistakes and make a plan to move forward, even if it meant doing it alone. Elise hung up on me. Child development. Why in the heck did I study that? I reflected on it for a time and remembered that it was before I met David and started working for his business. I wanted to work with kids. I even planned to have children with David. He would have been an excellent father. Why did I give up on that dream? I thought about it some more and concluded it was money. When David's business took off and I started getting whatever I wanted, looking beautiful and being fashionable became even more essential. If I became pregnant, it would ruin my figure. I'd become one of those corn-fed country females with childbearing hips. The seats in my class were simply not large enough for that ass. What about clothing? Most of the designers I wore didn't produce garments that big, so I took the pill. And while David had discussed kids a few times throughout the years, we had our own activities to keep us busy. Okay, I couldn't find a job. I'll have to do better and launch my own business. Damn, how difficult could this be? David did it, and if he hadn't been such a nice guy, we might have become extremely wealthy. All I had to do was determine the type of business I wanted to create. The sky was the limit. So, I spent a long time thinking about what I'm good at and what I enjoy doing. While I was lost in thought, I noticed something. My parents were having sex in the next room, just a few steps from me. How dare they? They appeared to be having fun. They tried to be quiet. The thought of my mother spreading her broad legs for my father was enough to silence me. I started to doubt my sanity. Finally, I knew they were done. God bless. Then I saw them lying together in the dark, holding each other, much like David and I used to do. When did we give up on that? It used to make me feel so happy and loved. I remembered when it started. It was when I began spending more than $1,300 on my hair. I needed to keep my outfit consistent, so I wore a scarf over it at night. And I couldn't snuggle up with David because I required a particular pillow that supported my neck rather than my back head to protect my waves. In hindsight, it may not have been such a great idea. David always thought I was gorgeous, regardless of what I was wearing or how I dressed. Damn, Jeffrey constantly criticized my clothes and appearance when they weren't perfect. Okay, enough of the past. What am I good at? I definitely have a penchant for fashion. Perhaps I can create my own clothing store and eventually get into design. This would be an excellent start. I compiled a list of everything I'd need to launch my own apparel business. The next morning, during breakfast, my father sneered at me over his cup of coffee. I asked him directly how much money we had. What does we mean, Kemosabe? He asked. I'm considering beginning my own business, and I need a lot of money, Dad, I said. He nearly fell over laughing at me. Then he stood up, glanced at me, and laughed again. My mother came in and asked him what was so amusing. He told her that I was starting a business on my mother's credit. She didn't laugh, but instead smiled and reached over to pat my forehead. Seriously, Dad, how much money do we have? I snapped. Mabel, he said, trying to control his laughter. We have enough to get by. Your mother and I saved up for our retirement, not for starting a business. But I have a plan, I insisted. Plans are great, but they need money to work, he said. And I don't think you realize how much it takes to start a business. My mother added gently, maybe you should start small, Mabel. Get a job, save some money, and then see where you can go from there. Their words stung, but they had a point. I needed a more realistic approach. I spent the rest of the day researching small business loans and grants, trying to figure out the best way to get started without relying solely on my parents. By the time evening rolled around, I had a rough plan. I would start with a small online store, selling curated fashion items and accessories. It wasn't the grand boutique I envisioned, but it was a start. I would save every penny I earned and reinvest it into the business, growing it gradually. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was a step toward reclaiming my independence. And who knows, maybe in a few years, I would have my own successful fashion line. One thing was certain, I wasn't going to let my past mistakes define my future. He got serious and said no. I was stunned. We've set aside some money for the future, he explained. We wanted to be able to do and see certain things as we grew older. We've also saved enough money to provide you and your sister with spare change in case of an emergency. But damn it, you can't foretell the future. Mom came over to hug him. Mabel, your mother's health is costing us more than we could have imagined. When she was first diagnosed and she was practically screaming from ear to ear, I was eager to do anything to relieve her suffering. Her treatment is pricey, but it is worthwhile. Looking at her today, you wouldn't think she's in any pain, but it's eaten up nearly all of our funds. I wasn't sure what I would do. I even considered returning to work so we could have some money. Your husband recently received payment and urged me not to return to work, so your mother and I can spend our golden years together. He advised young people to work. We deserve to rest. So after a few months, when my retirement checks returned to an almost reasonable bank level, I called him and informed him we could pay for some of the treatments ourselves. He told us to spend the money on the excursions we wanted or go to the sites we wanted to see. So do you have any money? I asked. Yes, but I'm doing as my brother-in-law instructed. Your mother and I are going to visit the Grand Canyon next month, he said. I was angry. How can he even consider going to visit some hole in the desert when I really need money? Dad, I said, really? Is it true that if David hadn't paid for Mom's therapy, you would not have gone to the Grand Canyon in the first place? Probably, he replied. You never know what could happen. So, since the money came from both David and me, it is technically mine, and I want it, I said. Mabel, you haven't moved since marrying that man. This is what is wrong with you. He spoilt you to the point where you don't believe you should smell your own farts. 10 cents, David gave. So, I'll phone him and ask what he thinks. If he says give you money, we'll do it. I didn't understand what the issue was. I will pay them back as soon as my business takes off. How long might it take? At worst, it will be a few weeks, 1 month. The money will be repaid. Hell, the Grand Canyon is thousands of years old, nearly as ancient as my parents. It was not going anywhere. Dad looked at me and then went to the phone. He called David on his cell phone and quickly began talking to him. He laughed, muttered something, and instructed David to keep his head up. It would be better, he said, before hanging up and returning my call. David stated that the money for your mother's treatment was not reliant on your marriage. It was not a present. It was just the family assisting each other. He stated he will continue to assist us whether you marry or not. He stated your mother and I should enjoy the canyon and offered to pay for one of the helicopter excursions for us. He advised you to get a loan from a bank to start your business just as he did, and everyone else does, my father replied, smirking at me. Why hadn't I thought of that? I cried. overwhelmed by the simplicity of the solution. Dad continued, Mabel, it's not that we don't want to help you. It's just that starting a business is a huge responsibility. It's not just about having money. It's about having a plan, the drive, and the willingness to take risks. Mom chimed in, Sweetheart, we believe in you, but you need to show us that you're serious. Talk to a financial advisor, draw up a business plan, and then go to the bank. If they see that you're committed and have a solid plan, they'll be more likely to give you a loan. I nodded, feeling a mix of frustration and determination. Maybe they were right. Maybe I needed to prove to myself, as much as to them, that I could do this. I spent the next few days researching, making calls, and setting up meetings. I realized there was a lot I didn't know, but I was learning quickly. By the end of the week, I had a rough business plan and an appointment with a financial advisor. When I walked into the bank, I was nervous, but also confident. I had a vision and a plan. The meeting went better than I expected. The advisor gave me valuable feedback, and by the end of it, I felt more prepared and optimistic than ever. As I walked out of the bank, I felt a sense of accomplishment. I was taking control of my life, one step at a time, and while it wasn't going to be easy, I knew I had the support of my family and the determination to make my dreams a reality. Who knows? Maybe in a few years, I would look back on this moment as the beginning of something incredible. All I had to do was keep pushing forward and never give up. David has some very good ideas. Mabel, there are 2 more things we need to discuss, my father said. I simply glanced at him. Yes, Dad. What happened with you and David? Is he too furious about it to be serious? He asked. I've already told you. I thought I discovered someone better, I said. There is one more thing. You should probably start paying rent to live here, he said. What? I yelled. How can you possibly consider charging your own daughter rent for sleeping on the floor in this? I prudently did not complete my sentence. I simply nodded and told him we'd talk about it when I returned from the bank. I borrowed a dress from my mother that did not look too horrible. I went to the bank and applied for a loan. I had to wait more than an hour to see the loan manager. He asked the stupidest questions I've ever heard. Things like, do I have any collateral? Do I have any business management experience? He requested to see my company strategy and expense report. Was I going to rent or buy? What should I do, rent or buy? I didn't know what he was talking about. I got up, apologized, and returned home. Back in my workspace, I was forcibly shoved against the wall. I reasoned that if I kept silent and did not cause them any difficulties, someone could wish to steal some tools and equipment. Maybe they would have just departed. I felt the man's hands go down my sides and reach behind me. They were obviously checking to see if I had a weapon. My heart was racing so rapidly, I feared it would burst out of my chest. I hadn't felt that afraid in a long time. The attacker reached in front of me and started unzipping my pants. I grabbed for the light switch on the wall and gazed at Elise's cheerful expression. You terrify the crap out of me, I shouted. Well, you won't keep your end of the contract? She responded by shouting back. Elise was dressed in overalls commonly used by mechanics and technicians. She wore a backwards baseball cap and had her long hair twisted into a ponytail. She was also wearing safety glasses, but the jumpsuit zipper stopped at her waist, revealing 2 naked breasts that threatened to burst out at any minute. What do you mean? I asked, bewildered. I don't care about my goal, she snapped. Last night you slept in bed with a healthy naked lady who clearly wanted to cuddle with you, and you did nothing, she stated. You said we didn't have to do anything, I reminded her. Well, I lied, she explained. Did you appreciate sleeping in my bed last night? I nodded. In my head, I actually did. It was like when Mabel and I were young, only better. Nothing beats snuggling with a warm body while you sleep, especially when that body moves and takes shape like yours. You feel really adored. I believe most people miss this more than sex when a marriage ends. Mabel has become too fashionable for me in recent years, and I have missed it. Say something dumb, Elise advised. Yes, I enjoyed it, I admitted. I felt very special and looked after. You're attempting to avoid the term love, she snapped. I felt the same way. The trouble is that running your hands over my body at night generates a reaction. She turned around and spanked herself. Very. She turned to face me, a healthy young woman. She pinched her breasts as if inviting me to come and inspect. "So if you want to continue sleeping with me, it's not free. It'll cost you money," she said. "I will write you a check," I mumbled. "No nonsense." She said she didn't have any money. "I want some of this." She stroked the front of my pants before stepping back and smiling. "Forget it," she said. "Anyway, you are about ready to burst. It probably won't be a problem." She took my hand and we walked over to the computer. She scanned a few pictures of my automobile. We looked at the car from various angles and modified pieces. We replaced the wheels and tires. We modified the front grills. We added a dark rear panel. We completely overhauled the braking system. We modified the color. Then we began arguing. The disagreement over the smallest details was almost fun, and I realized how much I'd missed having someone who cared about my passions. We eventually agreed on the changes and ordered the parts. Elise was right there with me, making decisions and offering support. It felt like a new beginning, something exciting and full of potential. I realized that maybe, just maybe, I was starting to let go of the past and embrace what lay ahead. I felt a sense of hope for the first time since the whole ordeal with Mabel started. Maybe, just maybe, things could turn out all right. Elise and I resumed our daily routines, and our bond grew stronger. We spent our mornings running and exercising together, our days working on the car and running the business, and our evenings relaxing and talking about everything under the sun. The more time I spent with Elise, the more I appreciated her for who she was, not just as Mabel's younger sister, but as an incredible woman in her own right. One afternoon, while we were deep into our car restoration project, Elise paused and looked at me with a thoughtful expression. "David, have you ever thought about what you really want in life?" she asked, her voice soft but probing. I set down my tools and wiped my hands on a rag, considering her question. "Honestly, Elise, I've been so caught up in everything that I haven't had much time to think about it. I just want to get through this mess and find some stability again." She nodded, her eyes reflecting a mixture of understanding and something else, something deeper. "I get that, but sometimes it's important to take a step back and think about your long-term happiness. What makes you truly happy?" Her words stuck with me as we continued working. That evening, after another wonderful dinner and some light-hearted conversation, I found myself lying in bed, unable to sleep. Elise's question kept replaying in my mind. What did I really want? What would make me happy? The answer came to me in bits and pieces, like a puzzle slowly coming together. I realized that my happiness wasn't tied to material possessions or the approval of others. It was about feeling valued, appreciated, and loved. It was about having someone by my side who genuinely cared about me, someone who saw me for who I was and loved me anyway. And that someone was Elise. The next morning, as we laced up our shoes for our run, I turned to Elise and said, "I've been thinking about what you asked me yesterday, about what I really want in life." She paused, looking at me with curiosity, and I realized that what I want, what would make me truly happy, is you, I confessed, my heart pounding. "Elise, you make me feel alive. You make me feel like I'm worth something. I don't know where this is going, but I want to find out with you." A slow smile spread across her face, and she reached out to squeeze my hand. "I've wanted to hear you say that for a long time, David. Let's take this journey together, one step at a time." With that, we set off on our run, our strides matching in perfect harmony. As the weeks passed, our relationship deepened. We faced challenges together, celebrated victories, and supported each other through the tough times. Elise's presence in my life became a source of strength and inspiration. One evening, as we sat on the porch swing, Elise turned to me with a serious expression. "David, there's something I need to tell you." My heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" She took a deep breath, her eyes locking onto mine. "I've been thinking about the future, about us, and I want you to know that I'm all in. I love you, David. I love you more than I ever thought possible." Her words hit me like a tidal wave, washing over me with an intensity I hadn't felt in years. "I love you too, Elise. More than anything." In that moment, everything clicked into place. The pain of the past began to fade, replaced by a bright, hopeful future. Elise and I were no longer defined by the shadows of our past mistakes. We were building something new, something beautiful, together. As we held each other on that porch, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Elise was my rock, my partner, and my love. And with her by my side, I felt ready to take on the world. From that day forward, our lives were intertwined in ways that neither of us could have imagined. We continued to grow our business, restore cars, and make a name for ourselves in the community. But more importantly, we built a life filled with love, laughter, and mutual respect. Elise and I found our own rhythm, our own path to happiness, and as we walked hand in hand into the future, I knew that we had both found exactly what we had been searching for: each other. Millie, and never come back to my house again. If David wants to see you, he can come to your place or meet you elsewhere, but you are not welcome here. Do you understand? Elise's voice was firm and unyielding. Millie, trying to soften the situation, held out a plate of fresh strawberry pie. I made him a pie, she said with a hopeful smile. Before I could react, Elise snatched the pie from Millie's hands and flung it down the driveway. He's on a diet, and he doesn't need your pie. Plus, he's allergic to strawberries, she snapped. Now leave. She then took my hand, leading me back inside the house. Elise supported my knees while I did crunches, though this time there were no kisses as rewards. When it was time for push-ups, I had to do them alone while she counted. Despite my determination, I managed only 14 before collapsing in exhaustion. Do you no longer care about my progress? I asked, catching my breath. Or would you rather I spend my time ogling Millie's enormous breasts? Elise burst out laughing. Of course not. Those things are ridiculous, I responded. She'd probably smother me in my sleep. So what size do you prefer? She asked, her eyes twinkling with mischief. Well, Millie's are obviously too big, I explained. And to be honest, Mabel's were too small. Something in the middle would be perfect. Elise smiled, clearly pleased with my answer. The following weeks were blissful and filled with routine. We exercised together in the mornings, shared lunches at work, and worked on the car in the evenings. Every night, we sat outside, gazing at the stars and talking about everything and nothing. Over the month, I lost nearly 20 pounds, looking and feeling younger and fitter than I had in years. One day, Elise suggested I get a haircut, knowing exactly the style she wanted. She took me to her hairdresser, and then we went shopping for new clothes. She picked out a few new suits and some casual wear for me. Elise had a plan for a night out in a nearby town to celebrate my transformation. While we were almost done with the car, we were still waiting for a few parts. Elise and I had compromised on adding a hood intake system instead of a supercharger, as I didn't want to wear down the engine. The intake system was due to arrive in a few days, and we planned to install it before our big night out. But that evening, things took an unexpected turn. Elise and I had often fulfilled each other sexually, but this time it was different. As we lay in bed, holding each other, Elise suddenly turned and climbed on top of me. We made love slowly and intimately, and for the first time, she whispered something deeply personal. "Make me yours," she said, and in that moment, I realized how much I wanted her to be mine. As we lay there, she looked into my eyes and softly said, "I love you, David." Then she abruptly got up and left the room, leaving me in a state of shock. The next morning, Elise was distant. When I tried to hug her, she pulled away. "David, I don't feel well today. I don't want to get you sick. Can you go for a run without me?" she asked. "Yes, but I can't have breakfast without you," I replied. "David, I really don't think I can eat today. I don't want to get sick," she said. "How about our big meal and night out? Should we postpone?" "No, I wouldn't miss this for anything," she smiled weakly. "See you later." Throughout the day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Elise was acting differently, and I couldn't figure out why. But I decided to focus on our plans for the evening, hoping that whatever was bothering her would pass. As I prepared for our night out, I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and anxiety. I wanted everything to be perfect for Elise, to show her how much I appreciated her and how much she meant to me. Little did I know, our relationship was about to face its biggest test yet, and pounding him on the chest while operating on the elderly man. He stared at me and instructed me to get out of the car. We were approximately 5 kilometers from my parents' house. As I began walking, I recognized a store where I might likely phone my father. I walked towards the store, but two men suddenly jumped out of an alley and dragged me in. One of them seized my backpack and began searching through it. "You only have $3 damn. Where's the rest?" he shouted. "That is all I have," I shrugged. "I'm going through a divorce." "Well, look at you," he exclaimed. "Okay, take off your clothing. We do not have all night." "I'm not going to be naked in an alley just to have sex with you," I yelled back. His partner approached and struck me hard in the face. My head began to spin. He grinned at me as he delicately removed my skirt. Then he removed my top, almost gently. I stood in an alley wearing only my bra and panties in front of two men whose faces I couldn't see due to their masks. I couldn't believe how vulnerable I felt, considering it had been a few months since I had sex. The two men seized my clothes and began to flee. "Aren't you going to do this?" I asked. "Hell no," said the first guy. "Furthermore," the second guy commented, "your breasts appear to be soft. We can sell your clothes at the store down the street to make enough money for an available female." Then they left me standing there nearly naked. What else might go wrong? I considered it, and then felt the usual dampness in my hair when I heard the sound of a bird overhead. Damn, I thought. And I was correct. Bird droppings, again. My third date was the worst. Almost as soon as we got into his car, he began pestering me. He attempted to touch my breasts covertly and tried to touch my legs as he drove. "Where are we now?" I asked. "Where are we going?" "We're here," he said. "But this is a parking lot," I said, confused. "I thought you were taking me to dinner." "Darling," he said, "this is not the date, okay?" I was perplexed. "What do you mean, this isn't a date?" "Listen, little sister," he said, "you've already had a couple of disastrous dates, correct?" "Yes," I admitted reluctantly. "How many horrible dates have you had?" he asked. "A few," I replied, reflecting on all the bad dates I'd had before meeting David. Then I began to think about Jeff and all the men I met after marrying David. Suddenly, I realized how foolish I had been. David treated me like I was unique. David changed as I grew up. He adored me more as my curves became fuller. David appreciated a woman with substance. Every other man I went out with treated me like an object, a piece of meat. Even Jeff, the liar who started it all, continued to view me that way. When a woman goes on a bad date, she wastes time. When a man goes on a bad date, he wastes money and time. And in most cases, it takes numerous dates to determine if sex will happen. Even then, it might take at least 1 or 2 attempts to really connect. I realized I had been chasing a fantasy. I had a man who truly loved me, and I let him go because I was too blinded by the allure of something new and exciting. I was too focused on appearances and material things. I was chasing after a false ideal, ignoring the real, solid love that David had offered me. It was time to face reality. It was time to decide what I truly wanted and needed. I had a court date coming up, and I had to see Mabel. Maybe then I would understand what I truly needed to do. In the weeks that followed, David and I found ourselves in a rhythm of healing and growth. We attended therapy sessions regularly, and each one seemed to peel back another layer of hurt, revealing the raw, honest love we still had for each other underneath. The process was painful, but necessary, like cleaning out a wound to let it properly heal. Elise remained a steady presence in our lives. She was my biggest cheerleader, pushing me to keep working on myself and our relationship. She even invited us over for dinner frequently, creating a space where David and I could just be ourselves without the weight of our past mistakes hanging over us. One afternoon, David and I decided to tackle a project together, restoring his old Mustang. The car had been sitting in our garage, a symbol of neglect, much like our relationship had been. As we worked side by side, scraping off rust and replacing worn-out parts, we found a new way to connect. The physical labor was therapeutic, and the shared goal gave us something to bond over. "Remember when we used to drive this thing around town?" David asked, wiping sweat from his brow. I smiled, recalling those carefree days. "Yeah, we thought we were so cool, racing down Main Street like we owned the place." David chuckled. "We were pretty cool, weren't we?" "Definitely," I agreed, feeling a warmth spread through me. "And we can be cool again, together." He paused, looking at me with a mixture of hope and affection. "You really believe that, don't you?" "I do," I said firmly. "We've come so far already. I believe we can rebuild everything we've lost and more. As the days turned into weeks, the Mustang started to look like its old self again, gleaming under the sun. It mirrored the transformation happening in our marriage. We were slowly, but surely, finding our way back to each other. One Saturday morning, as we were putting the finishing touches on the car, David turned to me with a serious expression. "Mabel, there's something I've been wanting to ask you." My heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" He took a deep breath. "I know we've been through a lot, and there's still work to be done, but I can't imagine my life without you. Will you renew our vows with me?" Tears filled my eyes as I nodded. "Yes, David, I'd love that." We decided to keep the ceremony small and intimate, just family and a few close friends. Elise helped me pick out a simple but elegant dress, and we chose a picturesque spot by the lake for the event. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the water, David and I stood hand in hand, ready to recommit to each other. "I, David, take you, Mabel, to be my wife again," he began, his voice steady and full of emotion. "I promise to love you, to honor you, and to stand by you through good times and bad. Together we are stronger, and I vow to cherish you always." Tears streamed down my face as I repeated my vows. "I, Mabel, take you, David, to be my husband again. I promise to love you, to honor you, and to support you. Together we can overcome anything. I vow to cherish you always." As we exchanged rings once more, I felt a profound sense of peace and joy. The journey had been long and painful, but it had brought us to this beautiful moment. We were stronger, more united, and ready to face the future together. The months that followed our vow renewal were filled with new beginnings. I found a job at a local school, working with children, and rediscovering my passion for child development. David's business continued to thrive, and we made time for each other in ways we never had before. We went on dates, took weekend trips, and simply enjoyed being together. Elise found love too. She met a wonderful man named Michael, who adored her and appreciated her for the incredible woman she was. Seeing her happiness added to my own, knowing she had been such a crucial part of my journey. One evening, as we sat on our porch watching the stars twinkle above, David took my hand. "Mabel, we've come a long way, haven't we?" I nodded, squeezing his hand. "We have, and I wouldn't trade any of it because it brought us here." He smiled, pulling me close. "I love you, Mabel." "I love you too, David," I replied, feeling a contentment I hadn't felt in a long time. As we sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Our love had been tested and had emerged stronger, a testament to our resilience and commitment. And for that, I was endlessly grateful. Back felt more urgent than ever. I arrived at the courthouse, my mind racing with a plan to win David over again. I walked through the doors, feeling a mix of anxiety and determination. As I approached the courtroom, I saw David standing outside, talking to Elise. They were laughing, and he looked happier than I had seen him in years. My heart sank a little, but I quickly reminded myself why I was here. "Hey, David," I called out, trying to sound casual. He turned, his smile fading slightly when he saw me. "Mabel," he acknowledged, his voice neutral. Elise gave me a wary look but didn't say anything. I forced a smile and walked up to them. "Can we talk for a minute before we go in?" David hesitated but nodded. "Sure, let's step outside." We walked out to the steps of the courthouse, and I took a deep breath. "David, I know I've made a lot of mistakes. I let my desires and selfishness ruin what we had. But I've had time to reflect, and I realize now how much I truly love you and want to make things right." He looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Mabel, it's not that simple. A lot has happened. You hurt me deeply." "I know," I said, tears welling up. "But I want to try to fix it. I want us to be happy again. I've changed, David. I promise I'll do whatever it takes." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's not just about changing, Mabel. It's about trust. I don't know if I can trust you again." "Please, give me a chance," I pleaded. "Come home tonight. Let's talk things through." He looked down at his hands, then back up at me. "All right, we'll talk, but no promises." I nodded, feeling a small glimmer of hope. "Thank you, David. That's all I ask." We walked back inside and took our places in the courtroom. My heart was pounding, but I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I was going to fight for my marriage, for the man I loved. The judge called our case, and we stood before him, ready to face whatever came next. As the proceedings went on, I kept glancing at David, trying to gauge his feelings. He remained stoic, his face giving nothing away. When it was my turn to speak, I poured my heart out, telling the judge how much I regretted my actions and how desperately I wanted to fix things. The judge listened, nodding occasionally. When I finished, he turned to David. "Mr. Forrester, do you have anything to add?" David cleared his throat. "Your Honor, I appreciate Mabel's honesty and her willingness to make amends. But trust is something that takes time to rebuild. I'm willing to give her a chance, but I need to see real change before I can fully commit to trying again." The judge nodded. "Very well. I'm granting a temporary stay on the divorce proceedings. You have 6 months to work on your relationship. If, after that time, you still wish to proceed with the divorce, you can come back and we'll finalize it then." I felt a surge of relief. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a start. As we left the courtroom, I turned to David. "Thank you for giving me this chance. I won't let you down." He nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Let's take it one day at a time, Mabel." That evening, we went home together for the first time in months. It was awkward at first, but we talked late into the night, sharing our fears, hopes, and dreams. It felt like we were starting to reconnect, to find the spark that had been buried under layers of hurt and resentment. Over the next few weeks, we worked hard on our relationship. We attended counseling sessions, went on dates, and spent quality time together. Slowly but surely, the walls between us began to crumble. There were still moments of doubt and insecurity, but we faced them together. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, David turned to me. "You know, Mabel, I think we might just make it." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me. "I think so too, David." As the months passed, our love grew stronger. We learned to trust each other again, to communicate openly and honestly. By the time we returned to the courthouse, it was clear that we had both changed for the better. The judge looked at us, a smile on his face. "Well, it seems you two have made remarkable progress. Do you still wish to proceed with the divorce?" David and I exchanged a glance, then shook our heads. "No, Your Honor," David said. "We want to stay married." The judge nodded. "I'm glad to hear that. I wish you both all the best." As we left the courthouse, hand in hand, I felt a sense of peace and happiness that I hadn't felt in years. We had faced our demons and come out stronger on the other side. Our love had been tested, but it had prevailed. "Ready to go home?" David asked, squeezing my hand. "More than ever," I replied, smiling up at him. And as we walked towards our car, I knew that we were truly ready to start our new chapter together, stronger and more in love than ever before. Back was no longer just about survival. It became something I truly wanted to achieve. I observed from the back of the courtroom, feeling a mix of empathy and determination. A man's honor was being torn apart, and I realized I could have been in his shoes if not for the support of my friends and family. Without the judge, the sheriff, and especially Elise, I might have been in the same dire situation. The man's wife was domineering and seemed to take pleasure in his suffering, which hit a little too close to home. In our marriage, I handled the finances, but Mabel controlled me in other ways. What was the difference, really? I wanted to see Jeffrey humiliated, but witnessing it firsthand was overwhelming. Mabel took the stand, revealing more about her relationship with Jeffrey than I ever wanted to know. Her testimony was damning, leaving Jeffrey with nothing but the clothes on his back. His wife's formidable legal team was merciless. As she walked away from the podium, Mabel glanced at me and nodded. "It's your turn now," she said. "Teach that bitch a lesson." As I turned to leave the courtroom, Mabel hurried up to me. "David, honey, I'm so sorry about everything," she pleaded. "I think my hormones were out of whack. I'm not sure what came over me. Something was definitely wrong." "You look different," I said, studying her face for a moment before walking away. "Wait, David, are you going home? Can we talk? Maybe we could have dinner together," she suggested. "I don't think so, Mabel," I replied, continuing to walk. "See you in court." I left the courthouse feeling a strange sense of relief and resolve. I knew what I wanted now. 8 days later, Elise came back home. The first person she saw when she pulled into the store parking lot was Millie. "Hello, Millie," Elise greeted her. "Sorry about the incident a few weeks ago." "Don't worry about it," Millie replied. "We were both after the same guy. It happens." "Have you heard any news about your sister?" Millie asked. Elise shook her head. She and her husband decided to sell their big house and relocate. They've been driving around in that fancy car all week, giving instructions and making arrangements. They can't wait to get out of here. I guess it shows they can still make money, Millie commented. After everything he's been through, including the divorce, you'd expect him to have a bit more fight left in him. Once you've got it, you've always got it. Elise's heart sank. She had hoped David would be stronger, but she knew she had to live her own life. She had no other options. She drove up to her house and saw a white Mustang in the driveway. David had always been generous, and maybe he left the car as a reminder of their time together. If only he knew how much it meant to her when she accidentally revealed her true feelings. The next morning, she found another reason to let him go. She struggled with the door, but it suddenly swung open, and she found herself in a tight embrace. "Welcome home," David said. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice tinged with surprise and confusion. "Shouldn't you be with my idiotic sister?" "Why should I be with her?" David responded, his tone calm and steady. Elise looked into his eyes, searching for answers. "Because she's your wife," she replied, her voice softening. "Elise," David said, taking her hands in his, "I've realized something important over these past few weeks. Mabel and I had our time, and it's over. What I want now is a future with someone who truly cares about me." Elise's heart skipped a beat. "David, are you saying what I think you're saying?" He nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Yes, Elise, I want to be with you. You've been there for me through everything, and I can't imagine my life without you." Tears welled up in Elise's eyes as she hugged him tightly. "I love you, David," she whispered. "I love you too, Elise," he replied, holding her close. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, they both knew they had found something real and lasting. The future looked brighter than ever, and they were ready to face it together, leaving the past behind and embracing the love they had discovered. "Elise, I love you," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "We are divorced. I handed her the house and some money, telling her to sell it, make more money, and leave. If she doesn't sell the house within 6 months, she will only receive $50,000, and I'll demolish it to create a sports complex for kids from both communities." "Where will you live?" she asked, her brow furrowing with concern. "Are you with me?" he said, a hopeful smile playing on his lips. "I hope so, but I can sleep in the guest room if you choose." "No, silly, we've already discussed this," she exclaimed, wrapping her arms around him tightly. She then led him towards the swing on the balcony. "David, the guest room will soon be gone." She smiled, her eyes sparkling with joy. "Have you finally decided to modernize your home and convert it into a media room like your parents did?" he asked, a teasing note in his voice. "No, honey," she replied. "It will eventually become a bedroom, but not for a few years. So I'll end up with my own room," he said, a bit confused. "God, you're a fool," she exclaimed, laughing. "You made me pregnant. This is going to be a nursery for a while, and eventually we'll convert it into a bedroom for our baby. I also love you." "Well, I'm glad I didn't give all our money to your sister," he remarked, a chuckle escaping his lips. "Why?" she smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. "We will be all right." "Yes, but the next time you become pregnant, we'll have to build another room onto the house," he explained, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "Who is Mabel's new man?" Elise asked, curiosity piqued. "Jeffrey," David chuckled. "I met with them the same day Mabel and I signed our final divorce papers. I offered them $1 million and a house to share. Elise was only going to get a few $1,000 in a very short period. Jeffrey was basically homeless and without money. They agreed, but I did add a couple of conditions." Elise grinned as she kissed him, clinging to him. Even if they despise each other today, they are only compensated as long as they remain together. If either of them abandons the other or cheats, they lose all rights. The strange thing is that Mabel has gained at least 22 kilograms, and Jeffrey has lost interest in her, if he ever was interested. He blames her for derailing his marriage and career, and she noticed how cowardly and pathetic he is. She blames him for our failed marriage, so she absolutely despises him. There are only 2 things they despise more than each other. What? 2 items. Elise expressed a desire to work despite her lack of funds. David replied, grinning. "They will kill each other," Elise remarked, laying her long legs over his and resting her palms on her barely rounded stomach. Don't get too comfortable just yet, he told her. We still have stuff to do. For example, what? She asked, curiosity lighting up her face. Well, he said, when it all began, I was a happily married man. I'm happy again, but not married. Elise glanced at him, tears welling up in her eyes. You mean what she said? Do you want that? Yes, he answered simply. I need Millie's telephone number. Elise flung him onto the porch floor and stared at him with an intense gleam in her eyes. He felt the area around his thigh. Damn, Elise, you broke it, he said, half laughing, half groaning. Sorry, honey, she said, her tone softening. Is it a leg or the hip? I'm not that old, he snapped, then softened. Did you break the box with your wedding ring? She rolled him over and began checking his pockets until she found what she was looking for. Her eyes lit up as she discovered the box and set it aside. Then, with a mischievous grin, she began removing his pants right there on her veranda. Would you like to marry me again? Do you want to see the ring first? I asked, a playful smile tugging at my lips. Don't get me wrong, she stated, her eyes twinkling. The ring is significant, but I'm not going to say no. I've wanted this for most of my life. However, what we have together is more significant than any ring. She then picked up the box and ring and headed to her car. Elise, where are you going? I inquired, puzzled. I have to show Millie my ring, she grinned. Those bitches in town will finally leave you alone. Elise and I married, had 4 children, and have lived happily ever after. Mabel arrived back in town less than a year after our wedding and 3 months after the birth of our eldest daughter. She and Jeff had gone through all of their money and eventually broke up. Jeffrey ended up in jail due to issuing faulty checks. Rumor has it that he and his cellmate, Bubba, are quite happy together. Mabel needed a job. The problem was she lacked the necessary skills. However, family members must support each other, and because she was Elise's sister, we hired her as a delivery driver at a minimal salary. She now lives in a modest apartment we built over the garage. Sometimes we pay her extra to watch the kids while Elise and I go out to have fun. We decided that the child development degree should be put to use in some capacity. When Elise and I catch her longing glances, we simply smile and wave. Some people might think she got off too easy after what she put me through, and they might be right. On the other hand, some argue that a well-lived life is the best form of retribution. I am truly happy. I love Elise, our children, and my life more than I ever did before. Elise is overjoyed because she finally has me, and Mabel has to see us together every day, reflecting on what she has lost and what could have been. Thank you for spending time with us. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more fantastic stories.